why I left the corporate investment banking is this is really the last, the last leg for me. And I really hope that this is what we would be able to do. And if I have to say this was going to be, the last adventure for me, I'm glad to have been able to have a peek, because I can imagine 10 years from now, it probably is going to be different already also.
Welcome to a special edition of Banking After Hours, Leadership Conversations celebrating women in finance, brought to you by AWS. In the middle of 2024, Malaysia has surpassed its 2030 targets of 30% women in leadership positions for the top 100 publicly listed companies, 6 years ahead of schedule. That's when Taruni, who heads sales for FSI in Malaysia and Philippines for AWS, and I got talking, and we decided, there's a lot of amazing women in this space that we can feature, talk about their leadership stories, about their journey. And here we are today with one of the most iconic leaders in the banking space, Teh Maimunah, who's currently the CEO of AEON Bank. Welcome back to the show. Always happy to have you back.
Nice to be here.
As always. And you've had quite a long, illustrious career in banking, from CIMB to Hong Leong, and now to running Malaysia's first Islamic digital bank. Talk to me about your career journey and what were some of the most pivotal moments in your career?
Actually, I did law because my dad asked me to do law. But actually, I cannot read beyond 3 paragraphs. I was better at numbers. So I found myself not practicing, and I went straight into KPMG. So as the story goes, I was doing corporate finance in KPMG, work for the other investment banks. So at that time, we got paid ridiculously, less than the investment banks. So then I figured it's just down the road. That particular investment bank was just down the road, and I think I want to go there. So as the story goes, I went for an interview, and the guy started. So the head of corporate finance then asked me very technical questions. How do you calculate this and different valuation methods? I literally knew nothing. So I said, I don't know, but I said I will learn. And then he said no to me. So I called him every week. And I was just a young junior at KPMG. I wasn't earning very much. I said, you can even give me, much lower than this. I just want to learn. I think after maybe 6 calls, he said, I'm just going to give you a job now. But after 6 months, so I had to teach myself. I taught myself. I found books on corporate finance, and I would learn how to build models from other people's models. I would break it up into pieces and then build it up again. So it was completely self-taught. And then I found that I really loved it. At that time in the early 90s, the equities market was so fun. It was a different world. I mean, less regulated, of course, and therefore it was fun. And then came 97, 98. That was a pivotal moment, I think, for a lot of people. I found myself not having anything to do, and then found myself in Dana Harta, right in smack in seeing what was wrong with the country, the whole cauldron, coming out of that. And that was when I found Islamic banking, actually. But when you had the title investment banking, it seemed incongruous at that time. You must remember, this is like early of 2000s. So I literally packed my bags and went to Bahrain and learned about Islamic banking. And a lot of people said, are you mad? What is in Bahrain? This is like 2004, 2005.
And it wasn't as developed then as it is now.
It wasn't at all.
Yeah.
Even in the Middle East at that time, there was a lot of different school of thoughts. People were still interpreting different contracts. I mean, some are easy contracts, but when you talk about money markets and capital markets, it gets even more complex, right? So it was a good run until the Western financial crisis came. So, lucky for me, I got to come back. And so then there was building Malaysia's first Islamic commodity trading platform, and then going on to Hong Leong and Bank. But I guess the key moment for me was when I was a single mother in CIMB, and when I became a single mother. I think up to that point in time, perhaps I was a little bit more playful. But when I became a single mother, everything changed. Everything changed. So that was my pivotal moment. I was no longer playful. I was very focused on being able to care for her without having to return to my parents' home. So I think that was a driving force. It was a force like none other. So people who had known me when I was little found it quite like, wow, she's so
Like a
so
different
driven.
person.
A different person.
Yeah.
And it's because of one little girl. She was only 2 years old.
I think sometimes these kind of life moments are the one that really shift our perspective on things,
Yeah.
the way we approach things, and really what our priorities are. I guess for you, that's the moment. And you were also in the right time, right place as well. I think during that particular crisis, it really shone the light on why there is a place in this world for Islamic finance. And even with your whole digital role with Hong Leong back then, that was on the cusp of digital transformation of banks in Malaysia. So I think it's very interesting that throughout your career, you've always been in these right moments to be able to drive a certain change here and there. When you think back about the decades of leadership that you've had, if you were to think back about certain moments in your career, would there be any advice that you would give your younger self?
I don't think I would have changed anything at all, except for I almost gave birth to my youngest in Karachi on the way back to Malaysia. I kind of lied. Flying was being very from Bahrain, yeah. But if there's only one other thing, possibly was perhaps in the early days, maybe some patience would have been better. Very impatient, so.
But that's a design of youth sometimes, right?
I think so. It was a design of youth and abrasiveness. So
that's also a design of youth.
But again, maybe it's the job.
Yeah.
So everybody's like that. So yeah, but so I may, because you don't have to be like that to be able to be effective. So, and especially for women, maybe honestly at that time, because I was only among boys, you know, it was really much a boys' business. You have to just kind of be as...
Put yourself out there, right? Like,
or as filthy mouth as they were. So I've told my children that to just stay true to themselves and to embrace their femininity. That they
it's
don't
a strength
have to
too, right? It's a different approach, but
it is. And of course, it was after having maybe 3 children, and then I kind of mellowed down and then saw that actually you win people over with love. It's a lot easier. I feel love can go a lot further than just throwing the whip. So when you whip, I'll do it for you, but would I do it for you again? I don't know. But if people believe in your cause, and I think that's what you need, especially where we are today, right? We're building something new. Nobody has any idea where it's going to go. So you got to get people to believe in you.
Strong points. I mean, a whip can only get you so far, right?
It's like parenting, lah.
Yeah.
You got to kind
Tough love, soft love.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Really, it should be that.
Makes a lot of sense. What about you, Taruni? I mean, if you were to think back in your whole career that you spent in tech, which is quite some
25, 26 years, maybe counting. Yeah.
What would be some of the things that you tell yourself?
So this is something someone said to me when I was doing the interview at AWS, and I really wish I'd heard this when I was in my 20s. So the interview process at Amazon is very unique in that we look first for whether you fit the culture, because the culture is such a, it's in the DNA of every person. So if you fit it, you thrive. Equally, if you find that you can't really align to the culture, you will really struggle. So we spend a lot of time with people to understand whether that match is strong. And what that translates to is you meet 5 people and you talk about your work, examples of career situations, customer situations, complex problems that you've solved. And that allows us to look at whether you fit the culture. It also allows the person to get a view of what are people like at AWS. So during the interview process, and this was the last person I spoke to, he just ended it with, it was a Friday, we were wrapping up, and I was asking him about what his job was like. He was 9 months into the company. And he said, the one thing I've learned is if you want to be the smartest person sitting in a room, Amazon is not for you. You have to be very comfortable with being one of many and working with very, very smart people. And if I slice that I've always been someone who wants to do
Yeah.
it all, run the show, lead the charge. Everyone should look up to
Yeah.
me, learn from me. And what you realize is when you open yourself up and say, hey, this is a room that I can learn from, you're growing the learning curve. You're accepting that you may have a weakness, which is something I struggle with, just to be comfortable with, I don't know it all. And all of that comes together, right? So, and I really wish I'd had that during my 20s. I think I would have missed chances of learning from people simply because I was going after a team that I could lead.
I think it's interesting, right? Because there's so many similarities. Being in investment banking, being in sales, it's such a competitive environment. You can't help but feel like you have to be the smartest person in the room. And I think it's a valuable lesson to learn from a young age. You don't always have to be the smartest person in the room. And often, when I'm doing interview, I'm probably not the smartest person in the room either. And it's always good to hear from people who are much, much more intelligent and smarter than I am. I've always also been meaning to ask you as well. And this is a perspective not many people would have, right? What are some of the hardest things about being the CEO of a new digital bank that people don't talk about?
Well, the hardest thing right now is being able to actually establish a culture and a right one, because we bring together many people from different backgrounds. And particularly in banking, we are a highly regulated entity. But half of our people are not, particularly from the tech side, right? The engineers. So some of them may come from places where, look, I build something today, I can literally just publish it on the App Store at night. What is this having to go through 20 different signatures, right?
Compliance team,
Who is this risk fellow? They're always making it difficult for me. So that balance is really difficult, because you also want to bring people from outside your box to get a different perspective. But on the other hand, you also have to fold them into your box. I always tell my guys from, 20 years ago, I said, this thinking out of the box is difficult because the way we're molded. So I always say, please you either burn your box so that you're able to think a little bit bigger, or get someone from outside your box. So that whole thing that I've been saying now it doesn't even make sense anymore, because the guys from outside the box would have to come inside the box.
They come from an environment where they're like, what is a box, right? And
what is a box? I don't have, and now, so I keep telling them, this is no different than football. You like to play football, but there is still the rules that you have the boundaries, between the boundaries of permissibility. And I feel that is the biggest challenge for me, is trying to string everybody into something that we all understand, a culture that we don't have yet. I can still say that, because we're not also suddenly AEON, because we're just so new also. So we're learning to fill in with a corporation that's 266 years old. So we have that, how long far back, the whole AEON thing,
all the heritage that comes with it.
We're Japanese, so that's us trying to learn also be that. And then, but trying to be so innovative and outside the box, but inside the box. So that I feel...
Without feeling boxed in at the same time,
Without feeling boxed in, So that I feel has been a big challenge. But the other thing is also people's expectations. Like, this new digital bank is going to serve, underserved, unbanked. But we do have issues with regards to technology, which the unbanked or that segment will not have access to. So the reality is there is a digital divide between the haves and the have-nots.
Of course,
So the have-nots that we're supposed to serve is in where there is a digital vacuum. It is very sad. We could see this already during the pandemic, right? But on the positive side is we hope, because there is a mandate, it's a national mandate. We hope that, governments or, some state funds will come together to narrow that digital divide. Because people's expectation is, here you are, go and reach
Solve
people.
the problem now.
Go and reach those guys that the other banks haven't been able to reach. But think about it, the other banks have got physical footprints around the country. If they
And
cannot,
massive resources.
and massive resources, if they cannot reach out to these guys, we have to find, and it doesn't mean that we can reach out to these guys because we don't have that tool. The channel is only one.
Yeah.
But the good thing is, all of us are coming to the table together to talk about this, which is great. But that is the challenge. How do we then be effective in terms of doing what we're meant to do?
And I think that's also reflective of the chatter on the ground, right? Because a lot of people are like, what are the digital banks doing differently? And I think the reality is it's not something you can expect within day one, because you've got to roll out some basic products and then have an evolution towards some of these mandates and goals that you want to do as well, right? Is that something similar you observe in different markets also?
I really like the challenge you've put out there, because it matches beautifully with Amazon Kuiper. It's a low orbit satellite service that we're hoping to launch in the next 18 to 24 months, which is meant to bridge this divide of people who don't have access to the internet. There's so much of how we live today that is linked to the internet.
Maybe you can help us with the devices as well.
Okay, we will talk about this. But you know, it comes back to the philosophy that AWS has. Are you solving for a real customer problem? The innovation that you bring isn't just about, I finished a meeting from a boardroom, this is what we're going to launch. Are you really fixing
What's the real world
something?
changes you're making, right? And I think that also brings me very neatly to my next point. And you know, for as long as I've known you, you've always struck me as a person who values driving social change. You're also what I would perceive as a deeply spiritual person as well. What do you hope to achieve out of AEON Bank using this as a vehicle to achieve some of these personal values that you have? I
really hope that we can help elevate people's economic status, particularly to the small entrepreneurs, because the NGOs that I work with, a lot of it is just giving the fish. I mean, we literally feed them, you know, on the street. So street feeding, but they come back to the end of the line.
It's not a long-term solution.
It's not a long-term. So this giving the rod thing is very real, but it is difficult for them. And you speak to some of those, you know, they may be able to sell, say, more of their nasi lemak if they had another pot. So this is real, because I've actually interviewed them. You know, I can only do so much, but if I had 2 more rice pots, I could sell to more people. So who's going to fund that capex? So that is the real reason why I'm here, Vincent, why I left the corporate investment banking. This is really the last leg for me. And I really hope that this is what we would be able to do. So I feel that because AEON is part of a very huge retail ecosystem, we can quite easily experiment this with people within our ecosystem.
Existing vendors.
Our suppliers. I mean, our suppliers, we have so many stores, right? The top 80% are all taken care of. What about that bottom 20? So, and our tenants, of course, if you go to our malls, you will see big names like H&M, Uniqlo's, but there's also the individual F&B shops. That's like one store wonder, right? Who's taking care of them? So if we can use our ecosystem and establish that a certain way of doing that can be sustainable, the hope is then to reach out. Because I've seen this back where I was only able to support the larger SMEs. And the smaller SMEs, unless you have collateral, it's quite hard for us to help you.
And I think that's the thing that people miss out about the AEON ecosystem sometimes, right? Because they always think about the larger brands, the Nestle's, the P&G's of the world, but there are also a lot of independent small businesses that's part of the network that I think there's a real opportunity for you guys to be able to elevate as well.
Yeah, because the Nestle is one of our largest suppliers, right?
Yeah, they don't don't necessarily
they
struggle.
They are overbanked. But you know, if you are the person that comes, because if you go to our shops, right, we have freshly made cakes, freshly made nasi lemak in the morning. So what about those?
These are the people who would
Yeah.
really need this
Yeah.
kind of services as well. I think, when we met and where we are today, the world is so different, and technology has become so intertwined with running a bank. How do you think the dynamics of banking have changed? The dynamics of running a bank has changed 10 years ago versus what it is today?
The first thing is running a multi-generational team. I think that's the first.
Now you bring in Gen Zs into the fold as well, not just the Gen Ys, right?
It was so different back then. I mean, forget about technology. It was just that you do as you're told. And
It's a different culture
It was
altogether.
different culture. There was no such thing as, we have to work late, we just work late. So managing this multi-generational thing is a challenge. So I think that is probably the biggest thing. But being here is exciting for me because I have always been sort of allergic to paper for about 15 years ago. Can we not burn paper? Can we stop? So back in my old bank, I removed everybody's photocopy machine. I removed the colored ink. So it became awful. So I hope the guys have continued to keep it that way now that I've gone. But so here I'm able to start everything. There's no paper shuffling. We're able to do things which is, for instance, I mean, we're all on Mac and we're all on GWS and, everything's on the cloud and, so we don't have to, it's different in the way we communicate. So we have our enterprise chat. We just couldn't
Didn't used to
use
be like that,
but
yeah.
now everybody, because the young ones use chats. So it was just a lot easier. I mean, the ability for, the concept of Jira and Confluence was just a tech thing, but now it's the entire bank functions on something like that, which is completely alien to me. Completely alien. So, I mean, none of the banks would have the entire enterprise working using, say, being able to use Jira. No, but
I think
we
some
had to
bank
learn.
CEOs might not even know the terms.
So I feel,
Yeah.
wow, I can act, well, because for me, I'm kind of snoopy, right? I know exactly what everybody's doing. So I think that makes the conversation sort of easier. But the challenge, again, is also the coming together of people from different backgrounds. So we're talking about people who come from banking and then the non-banking. So the technology for those who come from is different. And so, but I think for where I see in my team, I mean, 99% have embraced it, but you would have that odd, uncle or auntie that's still learning how to figure out how to do this.
Who wants to take
The last
printouts?
holdout.
So we've only allowed my chairman. But
There's a small quota for
that's
uncles.
him only, but no one else. Yeah, I don't care. You have to learn how to use that. But yeah. But it's such a privilege, actually. And if I have to say this was going to be, the last adventure for me, I'm glad to have been able to have a peak, because I can imagine 10 years from now, it probably is going to be different already also.
For sure.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure. What have you observed is different about running a bank these days versus a decade ago?
Well, to have a CEO talk about Jira
Right.
and AWS, then it's that in
I
itself.
never thought, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the face of how much change has happened. What you spoke about, thinking outside the box and the boundaries, and I think that's really where technology has really made a difference. The boxes have become bigger, the boundary lines are wider. You're reaching out to customers that you otherwise would not be able to have access to simply because they have a mobile phone. You can alternate credit score them, and you can do it at a lower cost to serve. I think that's that fundamental paradigm shift that's coming across, whether you're a traditional bank or a digibank or a fintech. Technology we see really bringing in that superpower of scale in a very safe and secure way, because at the end of the day, it is regulated.
For sure.
I think also what you're learning in banks today is changing. We see a lot of customers also now focusing on skills, and those skills being technology-focused skills.
I want to circle back to what you were saying earlier, that possibly this could be your last leg, right? And I think a lot of us, we reach a point in our career where we start thinking about our legacy. We start thinking about, these decades of work that we've done. What do I have to leave behind? So for you, what is that for you?
I haven't really thought of it that way, but what I would like to see is after the investment and emotions is that first and foremost, we will be a cashless society. I really feel we have to move towards that, and I hope that my little contribution to the national agenda would make a wee bit difference. The reason for that is I remembered what it was like 35 years ago if I had to set up a shop. Everything would have to be brick and mortar.
Yeah.
But now the access into the market is so much easier. And if you don't have, online payments, that economy would never grow.
For sure.
And the cash society is actually debilitating to me. It is, because I have to see you, pay you, I have to count and I have to go. All that takes time, whereas it can be more productive doing other things. And the other thing I also believe that, of course, some people would say, but cash is important for the black market or the grey market or whatever they call it. Because cash is
They will find a way, the black market.
because people say cash is anonymous. I really hope we'll be able to help the micro entrepreneurs, really, because I have seen how. So I've met this guy once, maybe about 10 years ago. He used to get into trouble, got in and out of prison. And literally, he got into a program, and it was a government program that funded his first car wash. He went on to own 20 car washes. He became big boss, and then he was making money. And from his story, he said that had that government program not been in place, he would probably get in and out of jail again. So, but we cannot keep depending on just the government to be funding all these things.
The private sector needs
So
to play
the
a role
private sector,
too,
and people say, oh, we're not a charity organization. It doesn't have to be a charitable thing. It can be commercially viable.
It can be aligned, for sure.
It can. So, and then I see some burger boys in Kota Damansara. When you ask them, actually there's one or two guys that own about 10. And they have no access to funding, so they borrow from their family, So imagine if we can provide that line to them. Yeah.
I mean, the Ramly as a company is easy to get, right? But the guys who actually need it, that's where the gap is.
The Ramly buyers, the stalls.
Yeah.
But the supermarket that buy Ramly stuff,
That's a different.
they will get funding, right? So if you want to talk about building a society where the disparity is, both of you would have gone to countries where you have seen the disparity like that. We must never be that. We must never be that. That is the fear that I know. There's a lot of programs done by the government, but I think the digital banks, banking fraternity as a whole has got a role to play.
Certainly.
Yeah.
That's a world I want to see as well, where corporations are also an integral part towards driving this social change and elevating society as a whole.
There's a lot of effort by a lot of people.
Yeah.
But hopefully, we can, just a little drop hopefully can make a difference.
Yeah. And I think on that note, we need to look at how in our own leadership journeys, our own running of corporations, how we can align these businesses with societal goal, right? And with that, I want to thank you both for your time and sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.